Welcome to Gifted Underachievers, the podcast for mid-level creatives with delusional ambitions. In this segment, Pat and James discuss art driving social change. The old tricks won't work anymore. We have to find a new way forward. What should it be? What could it be? James and Pat explore. No answers, lots of questions. Enjoy.
Sir James?
Yes, Madam Doby.
I have a question for you.
Okay, yeah, I'm ready.
All right, here's my question. Can creative works lead to positive change? And by that, I think we're talking about cultural change. Oh, has that era passed where creative works can affect cultural effect, like with an E, cultural change? Or do we need, or maybe social change? Or do we need to be much more clever at how we affect the culture? It's a curious question.
Yeah, I mean, can our creative work create positive change for people? Can it improve people's lives? And I'm going to say I can't think of a creative work that has really made any meaningful change in the way that past creative works have. And I wholly encourage somebody to send us contrarian examples.
Well, can you give an example of a past creative work that's created positive
Yeah, I
change?
mean, the big one that comes to mind, and it's because we were talking about it, was The Jungle by
Upton Sinclair?
Upton Sinclair. Changed the way that people viewed the entire way that food came to market, and the whole processing of meat and everything else. And it led to a whole set of new regulations and laws
Did it?
around the production of food.
I
Yeah,
was not
especially
aware.
related to meat. Is an incredibly meaningful thing. When you think of 1984, really laid out this notion of how autocracy is born, both liberal and right-wing autocracy. I mean, there's examples where you can connect an artistic work to public policy change, to social awareness, to all these different kinds of things. And I think that while it's still true that cultural, creative work does have an impact on the culture, I don't mean to say it does not at all. I think that if you really, really, truly want to have that same level of impact, you can't keep redoing the same things. You've got to be more clever about how you approach it, right?
Okay.
So me personally, I'm not so much trying to change the culture. I'm not trying to, enact policy with my creative work. But I am trying to connect with people and make them a little bit more aware and myself more aware of what this life that we're leading is like and these small little detaily kind of things. But I think if I were to be more of a polemicist about my work, I would really want to focus on not trying to replicate what has worked in the past because it's not working anymore. It's lost its impact. It's not as hot as it used to be. And so I think there needs to be a new way of approaching it.
Okay.
And I don't know what that is. And I think that's maybe part of the excitement is that people who are trying to figure out, okay, well then what is the new way? What can we do? How can we be more clever? I think that's really interesting. And I'd love, for people to really be doing that and to hear about people who are doing that. So how about you?
Okay, well, so The Jungle, just to clarify, it's political fiction is the genre. That's what it's listed as, but it's a novel, and it was inspired by Sinclair's weeks in the stockyards in Chicago, the meatpacking industry, and its immediate impact was to provoke public outcry over passages exposing health issues and unsanitary practices. So it wasn't sympathy for the workers that it provoked so much as shit, they're actually doing that where we get our meat.
Mhm.
Oh my God. So it was quite a lot of self-interest in the sanitation. It was sanitation reforms that it led to, not so much better conditions for the workers, although it didn't hurt, I'm sure. And I'm just going by Wikipedia. I don't have any actual real information. But no shade to Wikipedia. I think there's more than one thing that's changed now, which is And the biggest thing is that the fragmentation of information. So social media and streaming services means there is no one organ through which people receive any cultural change. And there is so much noise. There's like a big noise pollution issue in, I think any movement would be very difficult to influence with art because there is no way to have that monoculture kind of root, like there's no, let's say the idea that we're all going to die, we're killing the planet, the climate change, right?
Hmm.
We're all going to die, obviously. That doesn't matter. But the idea is that we're killing every other species. We're taking everybody down with us. And I think one of the reasons that has, despite Barbara Underwood and, all these writers who speak to that topic, one of the reasons it hasn't gotten nearly as much traction as, say, this call for sanitation reforms of Upton Sinclair's is that there's too much noise. There's no one way to reach people. And so I guess I think that the most positive change my creative work specifically can lead to is not the my creative hobby or whatever you want to call it, which is writing fiction. It's my teaching.
Hmm.
Teaching and presenting. Those are the things where I can create positive change, and it's at a very small subculture of people. But it matters. It matters to me. So that's how I'm doing it. But I don't know that we're in the a world where there can be anything like what used to happen with fiction, and whether it's 1984 or or nonfiction. At some point it makes no difference, or other art forms. Like, did Bertolt Brecht's stage plays, in the precursor to Nazi Germany, did that effect positive change? They're still being performed. They're excellent plays,
Hmm.
musicals, but I think it led to the idea that art can come out of tragedy,
Hmm.
and be compelling art, and that there's cycles that we're seeing repeated over and over in human history that maybe we can feel that we can have some kind of effect for. But whether this is the world where that's true anymore, I don't know. I
Yeah.
think they probably
No,
have.
I think that's a really, really good point, is that this diverse amount of voices and fracturing of media platforms and, and you could describe it as democratization and that kind of thing really adds to the challenge in that so often these works, are only preaching to the choir
Yeah, yeah,
and they can't reach across to the people who need to be convinced for change to actually occur because we're all in our little silos of information.
yeah. We follow who we follow. That's all we see.
And I think what I would be excited to see is someone or some group or some movement that is able to speak in a way that it's not it can reach across, it can transcend, right? To
Yeah,
where something like climate change becomes more of a shared issue as opposed to this political issue and where you have people who are in the silos saying, no, it doesn't exist, and then you have other people saying panicking. We need to do something.
yeah,
But only speaking to themselves. And it doesn't, and I don't mean that literally, they're obviously trying to speak to other people, but they're not doing it in ways that these other people can hear it or want to hear it.
yeah.
And,
I
you
mean,
know,
and they're doing it in the way they know how to do it. So what are we asking too much of creatives to say you've got to be able to be so clever that you'll reach people who don't want to hear you? I don't think that's possible. If people don't want to hear you, they won't hear you.
yeah, I no, I think that is the essence of being creative,
Hmm.
being creative is that when people like Upton Sinclair or George Orwell or whoever came up with what they came up with, nobody had done it before.
Yeah,
And that's why it was so effective. And they were communicating in a way that had a lot of shock value. And and they were also providing information, right?
to a
Through their
much more to a much more single product news world where it's just the newspaper.
Yeah. And that model doesn't work anymore
Yeah,
of just saying here's shocking information.
can't be done.
People are immune to it.
Yeah.
They're not responding. So there's got to be a different way.
You think there is a way? Because I don't know that there
do.
is a
I
way.
do. I just feel like we haven't, it hasn't been found yet, or it's out there and it hasn't burbled to the top yet. But yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's the evolution of speech and culture and art and, creativity you reach these places where you think, oh, we can't take it any further. And then, something or someone or some event comes along and pushes it past those boundaries.
Okay, well, I think the way is local then, because I can't see. You remember Midnight Oil, that band from the 1980s, maybe? How can we sleep when our beds are burning? Where they were talking about the Aboriginal Australian population and how their land had been stolen, basically. And it was huge. It was global, maybe not in America, but
Yeah.
most other countries really responded like to the political message in that song. And that was the 80s or 90s, maybe. There's lots of music in the 60s. If I think any art form could do what you are proposing an art form be able to do, I would suggest it might be music. But that is also incredibly fragmented. Spotify, you don't even have to
Yeah.
buy an album anymore. You can just buy one song or get a song for free that the artist gets zero point zero 0.04 cents on the dollar for. So
Mhm.
I feel like we might have fucked ourselves actually, but I don't want to sound pessimistic. Maybe there's a way.
Yeah. Well, I think we keep ramming against the brick wall. And I don't mean you and I, but just broadly.
Yeah.
And there's not yet, I don't want to say that people aren't trying because I think they are. They really, really, truly are. But there's not yet been that kind of breakthrough where the communication is able to really be effective.
I think the
And
way is local. Sorry.
and yeah, no, I agree. I think one, it's not trying to do it en masse,
Yeah,
right?
because it can be done
And
on.
then I think, it is local and
Yeah.
but it's reaching across to people who are going to disagree with you in a way.
Yeah, true.
Um, and I also think it's taking a different perspective. I don't know what that perspective is, but we've tried this just here's lots and lots of information. Here's all the data. And it still just dissipates into the air.
You're talking about global warming
And,
now?
well, it could be anything, right?
Okay. Yeah.
Whenever right now we're in a state where when you present people with lots of information, it's not enough. And the more shocking the information is, the more it seems to balkanize thinking,
Yeah, and
right?
they exactly, and they just say, well, that's not true. That's fake.
Right. And
Because they
so,
don't want to hear it.
yeah. And so, one, thinking more locally, smaller scale, but two, who's the trusted voice?
Hmm.
How do you have a trusted voice?
Quite
And
political.
yeah, well, I mean, there's certain politicalness to it, but part of that cleverness is if you try and beat somebody over the head with a message, you're going to turn them off. Whereas before, the shockingness of it and the information of it may have been enough to wake them up. Now you're going to turn people off. And so
True.
you need to be much more clever in your presentation, I think.
I think so. I don't know that that's a creative job. I mean, I feel like you're making art because this is your operating system. This is how you process the world. Is it your in the world that we're in right now? Is there any one artist or even one artistic movement that can do what something like the Jungle did in 1906? I'd be extremely
Hmm.
happy if that were true and if I agreed with them. Like, what if we get some? Is Elon Musk an artist? Is that what he's doing? He's the art of fucking people up. Like, I don't know that artists or their creative work can lead to change, period, positive or negative.
Hmm.
But that's just because I don't think we have as much power as we used to because we don't
Right.
have doesn't matter what the shock value is if it's only reaching 100 people, it's
Hmm.
it's going to die.
Yeah. Well, I think, one of the things and I think we've talked about this too a little bit in the past, but is it's not going to be one person
Okay.
or one movement or one, business or entity, right? That, it is still true that there's power in numbers, right?
Yeah.
And so when the numbers get to the point where they're being more clever about how they're presenting stuff and doing it in a way that has a much more sort of trusted voice.
Okay. I mean, I hear you
I
say
think
that. Yeah.
and it speaks, you have more people speaking to the people around them,
Sounds like a
right?
business model.
No, there's still room for this writing a really good book that a lot of people read, right?
Yeah.
And so there's no guarantee of what anybody is going to take from a book or a painting or a movie or what have you.
Hmm.
But obviously, if you've taken the perspective that I care about this issue as an artist, and I'm going to use my art to try and move people on that issue,
Hmm.
trying to do it in kind of the the ways that have so far, succeeded in the past is going to be outdated and it's not going to be as effective. And
Hmm.
anytime you're really just beating, being very obvious and kind of beating the people over the head with your message, I don't think you're going to be as successful as you want to be with it. And that doesn't mean too, the other flip side of that coin is art does not have to be high-minded,
Or
you
or
know, art
political. Art doesn't have to
or
be political.
political.
I mean, it
Yeah,
can
it
be
could be.
high-minded and not be political. But I think what I'm trying to separate here is whether so it sounds like for the last sentence or two, you were talking about whether you're trying to proselytize within the art form itself. And I was taking the question to mean more, can your creative work that works as a creative work that isn't
Mhm.
written to proselytize, but is actually a really good creative work that speaks to a particular thing that you feel needs to be positively changed, can that lead to positive change? And I think my problem with the reason I'm saying I don't think so is because the distribution channels are so fragmented that it would be unlikely that one creative work would lead to any kind of change for anybody. But however, let me stop there because I also wrote that little novella, and it's about homelessness, really. And
Mhm.
I think that novella can create positive change? I'll tell you what, when I was reading, some of the people, I mean, going like doing a reading, some of the people in the audience had never suffered a day without a roof in their lives. They had never, there was some very privileged people in the audience, and I could tell that they thought about homeless people differently by the way they
Mhm.
spoke to me after the reading. And so that's what I mean by it's going to be local. And I think
Mhm.
that the other part of, just using that as an example, so it was shortlisted for this George Riga Award, which is about its social problems, social issues, and it didn't win, but the book that did win, a nonfiction book on the same topic, homelessness, you know, if I wanted to um try and to participate, and this was my plan, I just haven't done it yet due to being slammed at work, but I want to promote that winning book because I got to read it first to make sure I want to promote it. But I mean,
Mhm.
that book won because it's exceptionally good about that particular topic that I find very dear to my own heart. I don't want to talk about it, but anyway, homelessness is a huge issue. So yes, I do think creative work can lead to positive change depending on what you do with them and how you treat them and what you use as your platform and how many people see your message. Like, I think it's quite specific. That's what I'm saying.
Mhm. Yeah, and I would agree. And I think the lovely thing about your book is it's a really good story,
Thank you.
right? And so that's the draw. That's what art and creativity can do is it can draw people in by entertaining them and then informing at the same time. And when I think about George Orwell, Upton Sinclair, James Baldwin, all these other kinds of artists who very much had a social agenda, not a
Yeah.
which is not a negative thing to say. They faced oppression of different forms where, the books couldn't get published because publishers, the wealthy elites were not going to allow that to come out. And so they
Yeah.
had to figure out they had their own set of challenges, and we have our set of challenges.
Right, right.
So I think that, recognizing that we have our own set of challenges, but that we can be clever
Yeah,
and we
okay. I get
can
you now.
tell really,
Yeah.
really good stories and we can communicate in ways that I don't want to pick up any book, movie. I don't want to go hear a comic or anybody who's going to be just trashing stuff or beating me over the head with some very moral message, even if I
Yeah.
agree with it,
Yeah.
you know.
Same here. Yeah. I see
But
what you're saying now. I think I
yeah.
understand. I didn't understand. Sorry about that.
Oh no, no, no. No,
Yeah.
I didn't explain properly, probably.
Well, it doesn't matter because we get it now. I get it now. And I think what you're saying is about being clever. I now understand what you mean. It's taking a new, maybe not a new approach, but a more determined kind of longer term um, approach to getting your work out there when you feel it stands for something important.
Hmm. Yeah, and yeah, and if you want your work to be socially consciousness raising, um, kind of the old tricks aren't going to work. You got to try and figure out a new way forward. And um, yeah.
Okay, fair enough.
Thanks for listening to Gifted Underachievers, the podcast for mid-level creatives with delusional ambitions. We'd love to hear how we're doing, so please leave a comment, join our chat page, or send us an email at giftedunderachievers@substack.com. You can find us on Spotify, iTunes, and anywhere else you like to download your podcasts. Also, please hit the share and or subscribe button. It really does help, and we appreciate it. Thank you. Have a great day.